Just how far off is Missouri from being the team it wants to be? Well, probably not as far off as you think, and I'm going to explain why right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I have to question the amount of respect that Missouri's next opponent, the Texas A&M Aggies, are getting at the moment. And also, I can't seem to win the kicker argument no matter what happens, but darn it, I'm still right. I'm going to prove why later in the program. Before I start the program, I'm going to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And despite a 4-0 start, it seems like most Missouri fans are a little bit perplexed, worried, and possibly disappointed. Maybe even severely so by this start. If you look at, well, some of the message boards out there, a lot of posters, a lot of angst, a lot of hand-wringing, all of that good stuff. And certainly, I agree. Missouri's got to be better than it's been the last couple weeks in particular, especially in the red zone, for example, especially in the deep passing game. If they're going to be a college football playoff team or legitimately a national title contender, that type of thing. If that's going to happen, then Missouri absolutely has to get better. But the argument I'm going to make is that Missouri isn't quite as far off as I think people are acting because, again, just take the deep passing game. You know, a few inches, a couple feet here and there, just a little bit of timing here or there, just a slightly better pass protection, a little bit better, their quarterback and the receiver being on the same page. I think we can all just see from obvious film and just watching television that, wow, some of those deep passes are really close to connecting. And last season, Missouri hit a little bit over 40% of those balls thrown. Brady Cook specifically on balls thrown more than 20 yards in the air. Well, so far, that's about 1 out of 5. You're looking at 20% or so. So if Missouri can just hit 1 or 2 more of those a game, you're looking at a different offense. And also, in terms of red zone, especially last week, Missouri just was not good enough in the red zone. You can't just constantly settle for field goals against better opponents and expect to win. But at least the Missouri offense is moving the chains, and it has shown in against lesser opponents, I'll give you that. They have shown that they can run the ball effectively, pick up first downs and score touchdowns in the red zone. And just statistically, red zone is one of those volatile things, kind of like deep passes where, hey, game to game, there aren't that many opportunities. So if you miss 1 or 2, the numbers are going to look dramatically different based on those results. And the main thing, and another thing, explosive plays on defense, a legitimate concern too. Missouri has definitely made a few too many mistakes on the back end so far in 2024. But to that point, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, it's not as big of a worry as if Missouri just couldn't cover anybody. I don't think anybody's saying, man, Dre Norwood and Toriano Pride, for instance, boy, those guys are just getting dusted by the number 1 and 2 receivers. Well, again, Pride did get beat for a 65-yard touchdown for the opening score of the ball game against Vanderbilt. A great pass by Diego Pavia, by the way. But Pride got caught taking a false step, maybe looking back at the quarterback, and he got beat. But that was more of a mental error than it was, we just don't have the physical talent to compete on the outside. I haven't seen that whatsoever. And again, yes, the Missouri defense hasn't been perfect. But it'd be one thing if you were going, wow, we cannot get to the quarterback at all. Where is our pass rush? Well, Missouri's had a pretty good pass rush so far. They've also defended the run really well too, in particular against Boston College's, kind of ballyhooed running game coming in there. By the way, the Eagles beat the previously undefeated Michigan State Spartans this past week. So Boston College looking more and more like a legitimate ACC contender at this point. Now, Clemson looks like the cream of the crop at this point, but there's got to be somebody who's going to play them for second place there. Could well be Boston College. And by the way, to that point as well, if you're an optimistic Missouri fan, Buffalo took down Northern Illinois, who took down Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who, by the way, took Notre Dame, who took down Texas A&M in Texas A&M as well. Why are the Aggies getting that much respect? I'll talk about that really quickly here just a little bit later in the show. But again, more to the point here. Back to my point about how Missouri is just not as far off as you think. Again, the offensive line, to me, a lot of that is just miscommunications, not being on the same page. You've got an entirely new left side of that offensive line. And Missouri, guess what? Its offensive line got better as the season went along last year. I haven't seen Missouri getting physically dominated up front. There's definitely been some mistakes, no question about that. But I think if anything, really, Missouri fans, and I'll include myself in this, I think if anything, we took Javon Foster for granted the past few years. He was such a pillar at left tackle for Missouri, hardly ever missed a snap and just was protecting, Brady Cook and all the way back to Connor Bazelak's blindside for so long. I think we took him for granted a little bit. So having an entirely new left side of your offensive line, it's not really surprising that there are growing pains at this point, and not just the offensive line, but various other parts of the team as well. Yes, the young kicker, Blake Craig, is going to have some growing pains on occasion too. But again, I would just be a lot more concerned. I would think Missouri was really, really far off from being a college football playoff contender. If, for example, I felt like we didn't have enough athleticism at the skill positions, if we weren't big enough up front, if we weren't physical enough up front, and if we didn't have a defense that could create havoc. Well, all of those things I think I've seen so far. The Missouri defense definitely can create havoc. I think we are still a physical team on both sides of the ball. We've been just too mistake-ridden at times, quite honestly. The execution in the red zone was lacking last week, to be sure. Missouri's occasionally shot itself in the foot with penalties, without a doubt. But to me, these are all things that, well, I've said it before and I'll say it again, are becoming kind of a highlight of September football here the past few years. The more and more teams, don't do as long and as grueling of a training camp with two-a-days and constant tackling and all that stuff. I know Missouri said this was their toughest camp in a long time. It still doesn't really compare to, 20, 25 years ago, that type of thing. At the very least, the days of the, Larry Smith taking everybody to the Mexico Military Academy, that type of deal. So bottom line here is, while I agree with everyone that Missouri's got to get better if it's going to reach its goals, the good news is I think a lot of its problems are at least solvable. That doesn't mean that they are going to be solved. It doesn't necessarily mean that Missouri's going to get better as the season goes along. I'm just saying all of their problems are solvable, in my opinion. There isn't any, it'd be one thing, again, if I didn't feel like we had enough speed at the skill positions or enough physicality up front, then I'd be going, okay, we're screwed. And by the way, I don't think the quarterback is the problem either, in terms of he can't do it. He's got to be better. I agree. But we saw him do it last year on a really good team. There's no reason to think he can't fix whatever is his part of the problem of the offense either. And speaking of, well, Connor Bazelak and Texas A&M, in fact, well, our old buddy Connor continues to be the king of the near upset at this point of the college football season, as Bowling Green lost at Kyle Field to Texas A&M 26-20 this past weekend. Not exactly a convincing victory by Texas A&M in that game. So why exactly are the Aggies likely going to be favored in their game against Missouri? Let's talk about why Texas A&M is getting respect, and if I agree with it or not, coming up here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk 5-hour energy, because when you've got a DIY list, maybe even a the Forbidden Honey-Do list. Well, take a 5-hour energy shot so you can check everything off of said list. Do it before your workout. Do it before a marathon college football watching session. Believe me, I got to take a nap during the middle of those things usually, but not with 5-hour energy. And with zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. We're talking flavors galore, from watermelon to grape to berry. And on the website, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors. So go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com and get some 5-hour energy today. You can use my code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Well, our old buddy Gabe DeArmond over at PowerMizzou.com, he said a couple things today. One I agreed with, one I disagreed with. But you know what? Gabe was ultimately right on the latter. First of all, Gabe said made reference in his mailbag today that, you know what? Actually, Kansas State fans, forget about Kansas fans, but Kansas State fans are probably the toughest group to deal with online if you're in the Mizzou content making space. I got to agree with that statement wholeheartedly from my experience. The Kansas State fans I've dealt with online, rough. But you know what? Another rough thing, I got to say, so far the early lines you see out on the internet, not up at FanDuel Sportsbook just yet, but at some of the competitors, you see Texas A&M already a 4-point favorite. That's where I disagreed with Gabe today. He said in his mailbag he thought the Tigers would probably be underdogs next week, and I thought, no, that can't be true, right? But no, Gabe was absolutely right. Texas A&M has opened as a favorite, and I got to say I'm really surprised by that. That just speaks to the amount of respect that Kyle Field as a venue gets. However, again, Bowling Green just went down there and lost by 6 points. And by the way, fourth quarter of that ball game, Texas A&M wins it 6-3 in the fourth quarter. So that truly was a ball game there down toward the last second for all intents and purposes. It wasn't just as though, Bowling Green got a garbage touchdown at the end to make it close. No, that was a competitive football game without a doubt. So that leads me to question just how much of a home field advantage Kyle Field truly is, at least in 2024 with this particular group. All Texas A&M has really proven so far is that they're better than Florida. Yes, the Florida Gators, the team that everybody wants to fire Billy Napier as head coach, the same Florida Gators. They also lost by 10 points to a Notre Dame team that has proven to be not very good so far, I would say. So what exactly is the reason for giving Texas A&M respect here? Or is this just simple disrespect of Missouri? Again, I'm not even saying disrespect in terms of this is bulletin board material. Maybe the right word is skepticism of Missouri. Let's put it that way. Maybe some of it's warranted. I don't know. Again, I can't predict the future here, obviously, to make the dumbest podcast remark in history. But I just don't really understand why Texas A&M deserves any respect right now. Why do they deserve more than Missouri? If this game was at Faurot Field, surely the Tigers would be favored, right? So I don't know. You're telling me Kyle Field is worth 4, worth 3? 5? I don't know. To me, that math just doesn't add up right now. So I don't know. I'm definitely allowed to change my mind after this week against Arkansas. I'm sure that's when FanDuel Sportsbook will get its official line out, and certainly the game this weekend in Dallas against the high variance Hogs could certainly have a big impact on what that line looks like. So jump on it now, maybe, if you agree with me. Just saying. Now on this podcast, like I did in the opening segment of the show, I often like to be the calm, cool, and rational thinking Missouri fan, but that's often not me in the moment, to say the least. In fact, when Eddie Kelly made that important and critical sack on Diego Pavia in the second overtime. Well, right before that play, as I was watching that play back, normally I try not to have the sound on watching my plays back to avoid the sound of my own voice, quite honestly, because in that moment, of course, right before the play, maybe Eddie Kelly heard me, but I said, "Come on, guys, this is the effing season," except I didn't say effing. Maybe not the greatest moment of my season there, but I think I helped channel some anger into a great play by Eddie Kelly. At least that's what I'm telling myself. But part of that when you're in the moment and you're all emotional and everything, you're not necessarily thinking about strategy. And one thing I didn't think about at the time after that exciting opening touchdown there to Luther Burden III was, hey, maybe Missouri should have gone for 2 in that situation. And here's why, because here's another thing I wasn't thinking about while I was dropping desperate F-bombs at the end of the Vanderbilt game. What I wasn't thinking about is, oh yeah, the new college overtime rules that were implemented, I believe last season, certainly very recently, but after the second overtime, it then becomes a alternating two-point conversion contest. So no more, we're just going to get the ball at the 25, and then you have to go for 2, starting with the third overtime. No, now it's just literally, you get a 2-point conversion. You get a 2-point conversion, and you alternate back and forth until, well, somebody gets one and somebody doesn't. I hate that rule. Number one, college overtime is already a little bit suspicious enough, in my opinion. The 2-point conversion contest, I'm not really sure who thought that was a good idea. Obviously, they're trying to not have the game go on forever and ever, but the amount of times that you see a 7-8 overtime game, I can think of maybe on one hand throughout the last 25 years or so. But what I will say is I think Missouri was correct to have played it conservatively off that first overtime score there. I wouldn't have been that bold as to go for 2 there, even if I'm trying to avoid that. Now, if I were in Vanderbilt's position and the Tigers had scored a touchdown and, say, went up 7 points, and by Vanderbilt's position, I mean if I have the final possession of the second overtime, and I'm trailing by 7, that is the one spot where I would consider going for 2. Because guess what? We're going for it's a stupid 2-point conversion contest anyway. Why do I even want to give them a chance to tie it up? I'm just going to put it in my hands right now, especially if I, as an offensive coordinator, a head coach, have a play in my back pocket that I think is going to be really effective in that spot. To me, that's the spot where you go for it. So just a little strategy discussion there. And since Missouri is not on a bye this week, I'm not expecting an official injury report, but when we get one next week, I will be looking for Marquis Johnson. Speedy Johnson hurt his ankle in the second half of the Missouri game after returning a football that, well, it was a pretty good kickoff return, especially he catches it over his shoulder there. That was a little bit of a scary moment, but Johnson gets it out to about the 35 or so, I believe, but then left the game with an ankle injury. So that'll be one to watch here going forward in the Texas A&M game. Now, coming up on the program, this offseason I talked a lot about how, well, a lot of Missouri fans were worried about replacing the kicker Harrison Mevis. And I said, you know what? Of all my worries, that one's pretty far down the list. Well, apparently, no matter what happens, whether Blake Craig makes his kicks or he misses a few, I can't be right either way. But seriously, folks, I am right. And I'm going to prove why coming up here in just a little bit. But first, NFL fans, you know what time it is. It's time for some football, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you know what? I'm going to be looking for that Missouri-Texas A&M line as soon as it opens up over at FanDuel Sportsbook, presumably pretty soon after the conclusion of that game against Arkansas in Dallas. But regardless of what you're into, you got to check out FanDuel.com. Now, one thing I said this offseason when talking about the Missouri place kicker situation and kickers in general is I was saying, hey, give me an example of a Missouri season that has been derailed by bad place kicking. And I couldn't really come up with one off the top of my head, at least in the past 25 years or so. In fact, I think despite Harrison Mevis, yes, he, in a way you could say he cost Missouri the game against Auburn. Fine. He missed an easy kick that would have won the game. No question about that. But did that derail Missouri's season? The difference between 6-6 and 7-5? Again, it can cost you a game for sure. So can missing a block and dropping a pass and all of that good stuff, missing a tackle, et cetera, et cetera. And again, kickers matter. I'm just saying they don't matter as much as other positions. And again, I'll get to that in a minute, but also going back to the 1998 Missouri Tigers, that's the last season when I thought, man, if we just had better place kicking, we certainly, in my opinion, would have won the game in Kyle Field. Speaking of the Texas A&M Aggies that season, maybe one or two other games we would have had a better chance to take home a victory as well. But since 1998, number one, just the level of replacement kickers, just kickers in general, they're so much better than they used to be, especially in terms of their leg. But even in terms of accuracy, too, they're just simply better. The level of kicking is just way better than it used to be, sort of evidenced by the fact that, yeah, a guy who was a great 4-year player from Missouri is replaced by a kicker in Blake Craig, who from 55 yards, he can make it from 65. When he kicks it right, boy, that thing is flying, just a beautiful, majestic flying pigskin through the air. But by the way, again, he makes all of his kicks against Boston College, and I have people commenting, hey, nice call on the kicker. And then he misses 3 kicks last week, and I have other people going, hey, nice call on the kicker. So, I don't know, apparently no matter what Blake Craig does, I have people attempting to dunk on me. But here's a fact that absolutely no one has an answer for. Again, I'm not saying kickers aren't important, but the long snapper is important too, and so is the punter. Those are also important positions on the team. But the reason I bring up those two positions is those are the only two positions in the National Football League that are lower paid than place kicker. Listen, I'm just going to take the highest paid player at every position in the league right now. And in fact, believe it or not, Kansas City, the Chiefs, have 3 of the highest paid players in the league. Actually, wait, is it 3 or is it 4? No, it's 4. They have 4 players who are the highest paid player at their position in the league, and one of them is not Patrick Mahomes, by the way. He's tied for 12. That's pretty freaking bizarre. Don't feel too bad for Patrick making $45 million this year. I think he's going to be okay. But you know what? That is a great deal for Kansas City when you look at it and consider that Dak Prescott is making $60 million. But back to my original point here. Who are the highest paid players at their position? Again, I just said Dak Prescott, $60 million. Well, I think we all agree quarterback is more important than place kicker, right? That doesn't mean the place kicker isn't important. It just means it's not as important as the quarterback. I think we can all wrap our minds around that particular argument, right? Well, here's what I know. I know that if the place kicker were, say, I don't know, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th most important position on the team, then that person would be paid in that manner. Well, for example, Creed Humphrey, a center. Is a place kicker more important than an offensive center? Well, the league certainly doesn't think so, because Creed Humphrey makes $18 million a year as the highest paid center in the league. Chris Jones, the highest paid defensive tackle in the league, makes $31 million. Now, this is a real surprising one to me. Not surprising that Travis Kelce is the highest paid tight end in the league, but the fact that he only makes $17 million is a bit of a surprise and one of the league's great bargains for the last few years. You know, Travis Kelce is basically used like a wide receiver. Imagine if he was paid like a wide receiver. That would have cost Kansas City a lot of $1 million at the salary cap there. But again, $17 million for Travis Kelce. Harrison Butker is also the highest paid kicker in the league at $8.2. He makes less than half of what Travis Kelce makes. And by the way, other than long snappers, punters, and kickers, tight ends make the least amount of money in the league. Travis Kelce at 17.1. Even off-ball linebackers and running backs are more highly paid than tight ends at this point. So again, despite all of that, Travis Kelce makes 17.1. Harrison Butker makes 8.2. So if in fact place kicker is more important than, I don't know, any of those positions that I just listed off there, why do none of these NFL teams pay them like that? Please explain that to me. And by the way, one final bit of trivia there since I brought up punters. Well, the highest paid punter in the league, Seattle's Michael Dickson. Yes, not Dixon from the Missouri basketball team back in the day, but no, the former Texas Longhorn Dickson, that Michael Dickson. You may remember him from the Texas Bowl several years ago where he was the MVP of the game against Missouri. Well, again, highest paid punter in the league, making $3.9 million. Just thought you Missouri fans might be somewhat interested in that fact. But hey, thanks for being interested in the podcast here today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll tell another true son or daughter as well, so I can keep doing this and make a little extra money in my pocket. I appreciate it as always. So until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.